In this tutorial, I'm going to go over how to get started with your first edit in Premiere Pro, as well as some basic editing functions. I have a different tutorial on how to open Premiere Pro. I know that seems silly, but if you haven't watched that, go ahead and watch that because there's a very specific way that you need to set up the software before you get to this point. Now, in this example, I am going to use some footage from the current first project in my video editing class, but this tutorial will apply to anybody starting off with Premiere Pro or somebody who needs a refresh on some of the basic functions of Premiere Pro. Now, I've downloaded this footage already and it's currently sitting in a folder in my downloads folder. You never want to import footage from your downloads folder, no matter what project you are doing, or from anywhere that is not the same place as your Premiere Pro project. Typically, you want to have things saved on a hard drive like I demonstrated in my previous video. But if it's in your documents folder, just make sure it's nicely organized in a way for you to find it, and usually you'll have your Premiere Pro project file already set up in this folder. I'm doing a couple of tutorials today, so I've just got the separate folder for my footage here. Where you import footage from is very important because Premiere Pro will actually link to that footage. So if you are editing off of a hard drive, you will not be able to open that project if you do not have that hard drive plugged in and the footage is also not on the hard drive. It's not like Photoshop or Word or something where it saves the files in the software or in that actual project file. It just connects to them somewhere else. So where you import from is very important. So I'm going to go ahead and import all of these files over here into Premiere Pro, but first I'm going to move it in to that organized folder that will be next to your Premiere Pro project file. Before we even get started importing this footage, I'm going to give you a little layout of the program. I just wanted to start with this because you may want to start downloading your footage or organizing your footage before you start editing. You definitely want to do that, so do it in that order before you hop into the software. Now, little basics of the layout. Mine may look very slightly different from yours. Premiere Pro is highly customizable, and since editing is my main thing, I've got some specifics on how I like to edit and arrange things, but I've arranged it pretty close to how it defaults when you open the program. In the bottom left here, you'll have your project window, top left your source, right program, and your timeline over here. This is the default layout. If it doesn't look like this when you open, you should click on this editing button at the top here. What these buttons at the very top here do is that they rearrange the way the workspace is, so it will move these windows into different places. So for example, if I had two monitors and I wanted to move all my raw footage somewhere else, I could actually click here and move the folder somewhere, or move it to the right if I prefer to have it on the right for whatever reason. It's really customizable, whatever works with your own editing workflow. If you don't have an editing workflow yet, just leave it as is. Okay, so you can also go into your window drop down over here if you're on a Mac. It should be pretty similar on a PC, and you can rearrange it from here, or any boxes that you need, so any windows that you may need if they're not showing up, like if you need to do some color correction, or you need to see your history panel, anything like that, it's going to be under this drop down. So if something's missing, don't panic, it's not gone. If you accidentally close one of these windows, it'll be available here. And here with a check mark, you can see what's already open. Now I'm going to go ahead and start importing. The way to import footage into Premiere is to just drag and drop. I think that's the easiest way to do it. You can double click here, but make sure you're on your project window and you're dragging and dropping the footage into there. It's going to do a little loady bar and it tells me that there's an import failure. It just says that one of those clips was broken. If every single clip in your project is super important to you, go check that shot out and figure out why it wasn't working. But with this, there's so much footage, it really doesn't matter that one is missing. So nothing to panic about there. If you are in my video editing class, this is not all the footage, I've just imported some for demonstration purposes. Okay, make sure that you aren't going through your media browser. So as I look here in the Windows, in your default option, this little media browser may be an option here, and you can hunt through files in your computer. You don't want to be editing directly from your media browser when you find those files. And that's because it's going to take longer to render everything, and there's a couple other reasons. I know a few people like to look for footage that way and only import really specific stuff. But if you are newer to video editing, just import all the files associated with your project and don't worry about this media browser for now. As you get more advanced, feel free to research that and kind of streamline your workflow. So very important to import into the project window here. Now, this is where you can look through your footage. You have a couple different views. You can either look at it in a list view with all the names over there. I really like the icon view the most so I can see the clips or little thumbnail of them. And now, just by double clicking on that footage, it's going to pop up in this source monitor here. So this is where you view your source footage or your raw footage. You can also kind of hover on this footage down here, and as you scrub through, scrub just means you're kind of watching through footage quickly. As you run your mouse along the bottom of it, it will kind of watch through the clip briefly. I like to see the clip in more detail so I can look at the aesthetic quality of it and get a better feel for if I really want it in my project. Now, your timeline in the bottom right here, think of it like your canvas. It's where you're going to make the magic that is your video project. So let's say I want to use this as my opening shot. Actually, that's not a great opening shot. This one's a little more aesthetic. You may want to look for a more wide shot or a better establishing shot. Just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to drag this onto the timeline. Now you can click and drag the entire thing down onto the timeline, like so, but then it's going to drag the entire clip. And most videographers are going to film for longer than the length of the clip that you'll actually see in the edit, so that the editor can choose the best part of it. So this is not something you typically want to do. Usually you want to select a portion of the clip to put on the timeline. Now you will have noticed when I dragged that clip down, it created this new little window over here. So when you do that, that is creating what Premiere Pro calls a sequence. So the timeline is the window, and the sequence is kind of like the tab where you are editing the project together. Like I said, the canvas before is called a sequence. Also, some video editors will just call it a timeline. Timeline, sequence, honestly kind of synonymous, but in Premiere Pro world, the timeline is the window, the sequence is the tab within the timeline. That'll make more sense as you start to edit. Now, if you close that window, that little sequence is going to become part of your clips here. So double clicking on that will reopen the sequence I created. I'm just going to close it to start a new one here. You can manually create a sequence by going into File, New Sequence. As you get more familiar with file settings, you want to do that. But if you just want your timeline settings over here, your sequence settings to match the footage, just dragging and dropping it works. That's typically what I recommend for early video editors, is to drag a shot down from the project and then it will match that sequence to the settings of that shot. So that's what we're going to do over here, except we're going to select a specific part of the shot. So to select a specific part of the shot, because we don't want to drag down all 5 seconds. I can tell that this is a 5-second shot here. Let's say we only want 3 seconds of it. So I'm going to select the middle part of it. The way to do that is to use keyboard shortcuts, or you can also use these little buttons over here. That's called Mark In and Mark Out. So you can click on it and that is going to mark an in point, and then you can click on this button again and mark another out point. It's going to save so much time to just use a keyboard shortcut here. So just by hitting I on your keyboard and O on your keyboard, it's going to do the same thing. If you ever want to know what a keyboard shortcut is, you can just hover on the button that's on the screen and it will tell you what the keyboard shortcut is for that tool. You can also go into preferences and change your keyboard shortcuts. So mine may be slightly different from yours. As I said before, I've customized things. So now I'm only selecting the small part of the shot and I want to drag this onto the timeline. I'm going to click in the middle, so don't click on the timeline here, click on the icon itself and drag it here, and it's going to create that new sequence. Now, I have my shot on my sequence here. Now, if I want another shot, so let's say next I want to show this shot over here. Let's go with something more dynamic. These moving bottles look quite aesthetic. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna watch through the clip, find the best part of it. I'm gonna hit I, play through it. I apologize, that's really loud. And I'm going to drag that clip down again. And here we go. I have it on my timeline. And you're going to do this throughout the entire project until your entire project is done. Dragging and dropping. Again, this is an intro video. There are more, obviously way more features of Premiere Pro, but this is how you get started. The program monitor is where you watch whatever's on your timeline. There's your play, pause features here, and some tools that you can use as well. So let's say I put this on my timeline, and I'm going to just drop the volume really quickly of these clips so that we don't have to listen to that sound. Let's say I actually want this shot with the red caps first. I just click and drag. So I'm clicking on it and dragging and rearranging the shots in whatever order I want. If I want it longer, I just click and drag. And it will extend out from the original clip until there's no more raw footage to extend out. If I want it shorter, I click and drag it shorter. If I want to make a cut in the footage, so let's say I wanted to take a middle part out, and be careful of this, you could easily cause a jump cut. You could take the blade tool, make a cut, and switch to your arrow tool and take something out of the middle. However, if you don't know what jump cuts are yet, I am cautioning against this, but because this creates a jump cut. If you don't know what that is yet, Google jump cuts. If you're in my classes, we'll go over it in a future lecture. But I just wanted to show you that blade tool. As you'll see, it'll come in handy as you do more editing. Another really helpful tip is Command Z or Control C if you're on a PC. You're just going to edit, undo any changes you've made. I also like to show you that blade tool because it's easy to accidentally select it, and it's probably one of my most used tools other than my arrow tool. And if for some reason you're trying to move something and it's not working, you may just be on the wrong tool. So you're probably going to live in the selection tool for most of your edits. There's a couple other helpful ones. I don't use all of these, but I definitely use the pen tool for audio and the track select forward tool. Those are my favorites. You might want to look those up. Also the text tool. But this is just an intro video, so we're not going to get into that yet. Now, that's basically how you start editing. So again, double-clicking on the raw footage, making in and out points of whatever you want, click and dragging it down. If you don't like the order, rearrange it. And look at that. You are editing videos and able to watch your footage in this program monitor until you are done. Now, I will be making some other tutorials on audio editing and some of the other features, but this is just to get you started. I've already been talking for 14 minutes. So have fun getting started with your first Premiere Pro project, or maybe getting back into Premiere Pro. And yeah, edit away. Never know how to end these videos, so we'll go with that one.